Hey there, hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video, we're going to be coding the game Flappy Bird in Java. So as you can see, I currently have my game open and it's currently game over, but if I press the spacebar, it will reset the game. And this game came out about a decade ago, and the goal of the game is to dodge the pipes. So when you press the spacebar, the bird jumps a bit, and every time you pass a pipe, you gain a point. And if you collide into the pipe, like so, then game over. And if I press the spacebar again, it will reset the game. And of course, if I fall off, then I get game over as well. So that's basically what you'll get by the end of this tutorial. And before we continue, I just want to quickly mention that I am working on several projects right now. So I have some coding tutorial series. So I have some programming basics in C++ and Python. And I have game tutorials in Python. Currently I have one in Snake. And I have other game tutorials in Java. So currently we have this Flappy Bird tutorial. And I have other tutorials such as Blackjack, Minesweeper, and Snake. And I have a ton of tutorials in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I have a tutorial on Doodle Jump, Breakout, Flappy Bird, Space Invaders, Wordle, 2048, Candy Crush, and so on. So I will continue working on these projects, and over time I will add more game tutorials in Java as well as in JavaScript and Python. So if this is something that you're interested in, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date for new videos. Alright, so let's begin. So for this tutorial, I will be using Visual Studio Code. And if you want to learn how to set up Java with Visual Studio Code, I have a video on that and I will link it in the description below. Alright, so let's begin. Ctrl-Shift-P, Java create Java project, no build tools. And I'm going to save this on my desktop. And for the project name, I will call it Flappy Bird. Alright, so now we have our Java project. And then within our source folder, click on app.java. Alright, and then the next thing you want to do is click on the GitHub link in the video description. With the GitHub link, you will have access to the completed code as well as these images. So take these images and drag them to your source folder. Alright, so now that I have all my images, let's start coding. So let's get rid of this line. And the first thing we need to do is import javax.swing.asterisk. And let's start by creating our game window. So int board width is going to be 360 and int board height is going to be 640. So this is going to be the dimensions of our window, and these are in pixels. Alright, so let's create a jframe. Jframe frame is equal to new jframe, and then here we can pass in a title for our window. So I'm going to call it Flappy Bird. Let's make the frame visible. So frame.setLocation relative to no is going to place the window at the center of our screen. And then let's also make it so that the user cannot resize the window. So frame.setResizable false. And then frame.setDefault closing operation jframe.exit on close. So basically, when the user clicks on the X button on the window, it will terminate the program. Alright, so let's save and run our program. And as you can see, we have our window, but I guess I forgot to set the size. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I'm going to do frame.setSize to board width and board height. Alright, now let's save and run our program. Okay, cool. So now we have our window and the width is 360 pixels and the height is 640 pixels. And I chose these numbers because these are the dimensions of our background image. So this is 360 pixels by 640 pixels. Alright, so now that we have our window, we need to add a jpanel, which is what we're going to be using for our canvas. So with the jpanel, we can draw our game. So here I'm just going to right click and add a new file, and I'm going to call it Flappy Bird. import.java. And then I'm going to import a few things. So import java.awt.asterisk, import java.awt.event.asterisk, import java.util.arraylist. So this is going to store all the pipes in our game. And then import java.util.random. And this is going to be used for placing our pipes at random positions. And finally, import java x.swing.asterisk. Okay, so that's all we need to import. Now for our Flappy Bird class, we are going to have it extends the jpanel. So what this basically means is we are having Flappy Bird, this class, inherit this jpanel class. So if you don't know what inheritance is, basically this is going to allow us to define a new class with all the functionalities of jpanel. This way we can keep the jpanel features and add variables and functions that we need for our Flappy Bird game. Alright, so over here, let's define a few variables. So int board width is going to be the same thing. I'm going to make this 360, and int board height is going to be 640. And then let's create the constructor, so Flappy Bird. And then here, I'm going to do set preferred size to new dimension, board width, and board height. And just so you can tell that we have our canvas, I'm going to set background color to color.blue. Okay, so now we have our canvas, our jpanel, and within app.java, let's add our jpanel onto our frame. So first, I need to create an instance of Flappy Bird. So Flappy Bird is equal to new Flappy Bird. And now let's add this to our frame. So frame.add Flappy Bird. And then frame.pack. And generally, you want to set your window visible after you've add all the settings. So here, I'm going to comment this out and place it over here. Okay? So only after we've added the jpanel to our frame will we set the visibility to true. So let's save and run our program. And as you can see, we have a blue background. So this is our jpanel, which is our Flappy Bird class. And another thing is, here I have frame.pack, and the reason why I added that is because if I didn't add this, the width and height would take into account the dimensions of this title bar. So we want it to be 360 by 640, not including this title bar. So that's why we do frame.pack. Alright, so that's all we need for app.java. So I'm just going to close the file and I'm going to collapse this. And here we can continue working on our Flappy Bird game. Alright, so let's start by changing the background image of our game. So here I'm going to add some variables for the images. So over here, I'm going to have image, background image, and then image, bird image, image, top pipe image, and image, bottom pipe image. So these four variables are going to store our image objects. Alright, so now in the constructor, I want to load the images. So here I'm going to do load images. So the first one is going to be background image. I'm going to assign this to new image icon, get class dot get resource, and then here I need to specify the file path from the resource. So basically, if I open this up, get class refers to this Flappy Bird class over here, and get resource is the location of where this Flappy Bird class is. So it is in the source folder, and we have our images within the source folder. So I can just do /FlappyBird bg.png. So this is the name of our background image. But this variable is of the image type, and here we have image icon. So I need to do get image, like so. So now we've loaded the image onto our background image variable. And let's also do the same for the bird. So bird image is equal to new image icon, get class, dot get resource, dot slash Flappy bird dot png, and then dot get image. Let's do the same for the top pipe. So top pipe image is equal to new image icon, get class, dot get resource, top pipe dot png, dot get image, and then finally the bottom pipe image. So new image icon, get class, dot get resource, bottom pipe dot png, and then dot get image. Alright, so now that we've loaded the 4 images, let's draw the image onto the background. So here I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to define a function. So public void paint component graphics G, and this is a function of the jpanel. So I'm going to do super.paint component G, and this is just going to invoke the function from jpanel. So basically, because we inherited jpanel, super refers to the parent class, which is jpanel. And then over here, I'm going to call a draw function and pass in graphics G. So let's define that here. Public void draw graphics G, and I'm going to draw the background. So G.draw image, and over here we need the image object. So I'm going to do background image, and then we need the X position. So the top left corner is 0, 0, so 0. Y would also be 0, and the width and height is going to be board width and board height. And for the last parameter, I'm going to just pass in null. Alright, so now let's save and run our program. And here you can see we have our Flappy Bird game window with this nice background. So as a quick recap of what we've done so far, we've created this window and we've added a background image. So here, this top left corner is 0, 0, and this bottom right corner is 360, 640. So these are the X and Y positions. So basically what I did when I called draw image, I had to pass in X, Y, and the width and height. So X and Y is the starting position, and the starting position is going to be the top left corner, and then I specify how big I want the image. So it's going to be the width of the screen and the height of the screen. So just remember, when we're drawing, we always start from the top left corner. Alright, so now that we have our window and background, let's add the bird to our game. So I'm going to scroll back up over here, and I'm going to add a few variables for our bird. So just like with the background image, if I want to draw the bird on our screen, we need to give it an X and Y position, as well as a width and height. So here I'm going to do int bird X is equal to board width divided by 8, and int bird Y is going to be board height divided by 2. So for the X position, which is basically left and right, we are going to place the X position 1/8 from the left side of the screen, and the Y position is going to be half of the board height. So from the top of the screen, we are going to move the bird down halfway. And then over here, let's add the variables for width and height. So int bird width is equal to 34, and int bird height is equal to 24. All right, and just to make it easier, I'm going to create a class to hold these values. So class bird, and int x is going to be bird x, int y is going to be bird y, int width is going to be bird width, and int height is going to be bird height. And then we're going to have an image field, and I'm just going to call it image, so img. And here I'm going to define the constructor and pass in the image, so image. So this dot image is equal to image. So this is how I'm going to set up my code for the bird, and you can change it however you like after this tutorial, but this is how I'm going to do it for now. Alright, so down here, I'm going to add a field for bird, and I'm just going to call it bird. And let's call this game logic. And then within the constructor, I'm going to create the bird object. So bird is equal to new bird, and we need to pass in the image, so I'm going to pass in bird image. Okay, and now I need to draw the bird. So within our draw function, I'm going to do g.drawImage, bird.image, bird.x, bird.y, bird.width, bird.height, and then here I'm just going to pass in null. So the reason why I created a class was because I can make it easier to access the values just by using these simplified names. And I'm going to do the same when I add the pipes to our game. So let's save and run our program. And here you can see we have our Flappy Bird. All right, now that we have our bird, we need to make the bird move. But before we make the bird move, we need to add a game loop. So here you can see we have our paint component function that calls draw, and this only gets called once. So we need a game loop that will call this function over and over again. And we call this per frame, so usually it is 60 frames per second. So I'm going to scroll up over here in our game logic section where we have our variables for the game logic. And I'm going to create a variable for the game loop. So this is going to be a timer. So timer game loop. And then within our constructor over here, I'm going to create a timer object. So game loop is equal to new timer. And here we need to specify how often we should repeat the action. So this is in milliseconds. So if I do 1000, this is 1 second. So 1000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second. So we want to draw 60 frames per second. So instead of every second, we do 60 times per second. And then here, the action is going to be this. So this is going to refer to the Flappy Bird class. And basically, we need to implement action listener. So over here, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you will see that there's an error here, and it's saying that we need to add an action performed function. So I'm going to click on this quick fix button, click on add unimplemented methods, and then if I scroll down, you can see we have this action performed function. So I'm going to get rid of this, and we don't need this as well. So this is going to be the action performed every 16 milliseconds or 60 times a second, and it's going to be the paint component function. So with the jpanel, we can just do repaint, and this will call paint component. Okay, so that's the action performed. And then now that we have that set up, we need to start our timer. So here I'm going to do game loop dot start. Alright, so now if I run my program, you can see we have the Flappy Bird game and we have a game loop running. but you can't really tell there's a game loop because every frame is going to be the same since we are not moving the Flappy Bird. So in our draw function, we can add a debug statement. So I'm going to do system.out.println, and I'm just going to write draw. All right, so now if I run my program, you can see we are drawing 60 times per second. And if I didn't start the timer, so if I comment this out and I save and run my program, you can see it only draws one time. Okay, so that's why we need the game loop so that we can continuously draw the frames for our game. All right, so I'm going to uncomment this and start the game loop again. All right, so let's scroll back up. And we have our bird. So now the next thing we need to do is make the bird move. So in order to move, we need to add a velocity. And here I'm going to define a variable for velocity y. And I'm just going to set it as 0. All right, so as I mentioned before, this top left corner is 0, 0. And this bottom right corner is 360, 640. So these are the x and y positions. And if I want to move the Flappy Bird upwards, I am moving in the y direction, but it's going towards 0. So this is negative. And if I want to move the Flappy Bird downwards, this is also in the y direction, but it is going towards 640. So this is positive. And if I move backwards, I'm going towards 0. So this is negative in the x direction. And if I'm going forward, this is moving in the x direction, but positive x. Okay? So when we move the Flappy Bird, we need to give it a velocity, and a velocity is a change in position over time. And the Flappy Bird actually doesn't move left and right, it only moves up and down. So when we play the game, the Flappy Bird just jumps up and down, whereas these pipes move towards the left. Therefore, we only need velocity y. So let's say we have a velocity y of -6, that is moving up 6. So if it's -6, that means the first frame, we're moving up 6 pixels, and then the next frame, we are also moving up 6 pixels. So this is going to continue 6 pixels upwards, right? Because if it's negative, we are moving upwards. So let's go ahead and implement that. So currently velocity y is 0, but I'll just change this to -6 for this example. And here, I'm going to define a move function. So public void move. And within this function, we are going to update all the x and y positions of our objects. So over here, we're going to update the bird's y position by adding the velocity to it. So bird.y plus equal velocity y. And then within our action performed, before we repaint the screen, I want to update the position of the bird. So I'm going to call the move function. So again, this action performed runs 60 times per second. So 60 times per second, we are doing move, then paint, then move, then paint over and over again. Every frame, we are updating the bird's y position. So it's going to move upwards at a rate of -6 pixels per frame. So if I save and run my program now, you can see the bird moving upwards. And let's just refresh that. Okay, so you can see the bird is moving upwards. And we have one issue, and that is in Flappy Bird, the bird is not allowed to move past the top part of the screen. So I'm going to do bird.y is equal to math.max bird.y or 0. So it's going to be whatever position it is downwards, or it's going to be 0. So 0 is the very top of the screen. So let's save and run our program now. And you can see the bird is moving and then it stops at the very top. So we cap the y position at 0. Alright, so that's how we move the Flappy Bird upwards. So currently it is moving upwards at a rate of -6 pixels per frame. So at this rate, it's just going to keep moving upwards forever. And here's where gravity kicks in. So gravity is a downward force, so it's going to slow us down. So when we apply gravity to the bird, it's going to slow down and eventually fall back down. So if you don't know the physics of how gravity works, gravity is basically a change in velocity over time. So let's say we have gravity set to +2. So remember, gravity is downwards and going downwards is positive. So this is what we have if we don't have gravity. But if we have gravity, for the first frame, the bird is going to move up -6 pixels. And then we apply gravity to the velocity. So now it's going to move up +2. So -6 plus 2 would be -4. And then the next frame, we apply gravity again. So -4 plus 2 is going to be -2. And then the next frame, we apply gravity, and -2 plus 2 is equal to 0. So at this point, the bird stops going upwards. And then the next frame, 0 plus 2, we get +2. And this is when the bird starts to descend. So next frame, we have 4, and then 6, and then 8, and so on. So that's how gravity works. So let's apply gravity to the Flappy Bird. So over here, I'm going to define another variable called gravity. And I'm just going to set it to 1. So this means every frame, the bird is going to slow down by 1 pixel. And then down here in our move function, right before we update the y position with the velocity, I'm going to update the velocity with the gravity. Okay, so now if I save and run our program, you can see for a brief moment, the bird jumps up and then goes back down. So maybe that was too quick and you didn't catch that. So let's scroll back up and maybe I'll change this to -9. And then if I save and run our program, you can see it did a slight hop and then it fell back down. Alright, so that's how we can apply gravity to the Flappy Bird. So the Flappy Bird is going to jump up and then gravity is going to push the bird back down. And this is where we, the player, come in. So we are going to press on a key so that the bird can jump up again. So let's add some key listeners. So let's scroll back up to where we have our class, and over here, next to action listener, I'm going to add a comma, and we are going to add another interface, and that is key listener. And if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can just hover over here. And as you can see, when we add the key listener, we need to define these 3 functions: key pressed, key released, and key typed. So I'm just going to click on this quick fix and add unimplemented methods. So if I scroll down, you can see we have these 3 methods: key typed, key pressed, and key released. So these are the 3 ways we can apply key events. And basically, key type is when you type on a key that has a character. So for instance, I can type on the A key, and this would give me the A character. But if I type on F5, for instance, the refresh key, F5 does not have a character, so it's going to do nothing. Key press is similar to key type, except it could be any key. So it can be a character key, it can be arrow keys, you can press F5 or space. So this is for all keys, and it's basically whenever you press on a key. And then key released is when you press on a key and you let go and the key goes back up. So here we are just going to use key pressed. So I'm going to copy and paste this and move it down here. And I'm just going to get rid of this code. So we are not going to be using key typed, and we are not going to be using key released. Okay, so we are going to be using key pressed. So let's get rid of this code. All right, and it's going to be very simple. So if E, the key event, if E.getKeyCode is equal to key event .vk underscore space. So basically, when we press on a key, it's going to trigger this function and it's going to do a check. So if the key pressed is the spacebar key, I'm going to set velocity y to -9. So remember, with gravity, velocity y changes over time. So when it's positive, it's going downwards. So here I am resetting the velocity y. And then over here, I'm going to make a few changes. So velocity y, I'm just going to set this to 0. So the game will start with the bird just falling downwards. And then within our constructor, I'm going to add another setting, and I'm going to do set focusable true. And what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that our Flappy Bird class, which is our jpanel, it's going to make sure that this is the one that takes in our key events. And then I'm going to do add key listener, this. And adding key listener is going to make sure that we check the 3 functions over here when we have key pressed. So key pressed, key typed, key released. So make sure you have these 2 lines added in your constructor. And then I'm going to go to the app.java file. And right before we set the visibility to true, I'm going to do flappybird.request focus. All right, so make sure you have this line as well. So I'm going to save and close this file and collapse that. So now if I run my program, you can see when I press the space bar, the Flappy Bird is going to jump up. All right. And we no longer need this debug statement now that we know our draw function is working with the key events. So I'm just going to get rid of this. All right, so now we can draw the Flappy Bird and make it move and respond to our key presses. Now we need to add the pipes. So up here, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to add another section for the pipes. So here we need to define the 4 variables, the x position, y position, and width and height. So I'm going to do int pipe x is equal to board width. So this is going to be on the right side of our board. And then int pipe y is going to be 0. So the pipe is going to start from the top of our screen and on the right side of our screen. And then here we need to specify the width and height. So I'm going to do int pipe width is equal to 64 pixels. And int pipe height is going to be 512 pixels. So I scaled the dimensions here, and the actual dimensions for the image is 6 times bigger. So instead of 64 pixels, the actual image is 384 pixels wide. And just like with the bird, I'm going to create a class for the pipes. So class pipe int x is equal to pipe x, int y is equal to pipe y, int width is equal to pipe width, int height is equal to pipe height, and image. And we are going to assign the image in our constructor. So whenever we create a pipe object, we need to pass in the image, especially because we have 2 pipes. We have the top pipe and the bottom pipe. So the top pipe looks like this. So the opening faces down. And the bottom pipe looks like this, where the opening faces upwards. And one more thing I'm going to add is a boolean, and I'm going to call it passed. And I'm going to set it to false. So this is going to check whether our Flappy Bird has passed the pipe yet. And this is going to be used for when we keep track of the score. All right, so let's define the constructor. So pipe, we're going to pass in the image. This.image is equal to image. All right, so now we need to add some variables for the game logic. First thing we need is the velocity x. And I'm going to set this to -4. So this is going to be the rate at which the pipes move to the left. So we're going to change the x position by -4 pixels every frame. So when we move the pipes to the left, we kind of simulate the bird moving to the right. All right, so over here, I'm going to create a variable for array list, pipe. And because we have many pipes in our game, we need to store them in a list. All right, so now we have our array list. Now let's create a function that will create the pipes and add them to the array list. So over here, I'm going to call a function called placePipes. So public void placePipes. And here I'm going to create a pipe. Top pipe is equal to new pipe. and the image is going to be top pipe image. And then I'm going to do pipes.add top pipe. So now we need to call this function, and I'm going to call this function in a loop. Just like how we have a game loop, I need a timer for this place pipes function. So over here, I'm going to create a timer variable called place pipes timer. And so within our constructor over here, I'm going to add place pipes timer. So place pipes timer is going to be new timer. And here I'm going to do 1500. So if you remember, 1000 is 1 second. So 1500 is 1.5 seconds. So every 1.5 seconds, I'm going to call an action. So here you can see with this game loop timer, we have this, and this refers to the action performed here. So we need to create an action performed. And to have an action performed, we need an action listener. So over here, I'm going to do new action listener, and I'm going to do @override public void action performed action event e, and this is just going to call place pipes. And don't forget your semicolon. Alright, so now we have a timer that will call place pipes every 1500 milliseconds. So we are going to add a new pipe every 1.5 seconds. And here we need to create the array list. So I'm going to do pipes equal to new array list of pipe. So now we have an array list of pipes, and then every 1.5 seconds, we add a new pipe. So now the next thing we need to do is draw the pipes. So over here, I'm going to use a for loop. So for int I is equal to 0, I less than pipes.size, I plus plus. We're going to get the pipe for the current index. So pipe is equal to pipes.get I. And then we are going to draw the pipe. So g.drawImage, pipe.image, pipe.x, pipe.y, pipe.width, and pipe.height. And then for the last parameter, I'm going to pass in null. Alright, and then we need to move the pipes. So over here, in our move function, I'm going to do the same thing with the for loop. So for int I is equal to 0, I less than pipes.size, I plus plus, get the pipe at the current index. So pipe is equal to pipes.get I. And then here I'm going to update the x position with the velocity x. So pipe.x plus equal to velocity x. So velocity x is -4. So every frame, we are going to move each pipe over by -4 to the left. Alright, so we move the pipes, and we draw the pipes, and then we place new pipes, and then we have a timer that will place the new pipes every 1.5 seconds. Alright, so we have everything set up, and before we run our program, let's start the place pipes timer. So place pipes timer, let's start. And then now, let's save and run our program. So you can see, we have our pipes generating from the right side of the screen. Alright, so everything seems to be working fine so far. So now what we need to do is change the position of each pipe so that it's more random. So here I'm going to do random is equal to new random. And then let's go to our place pipes function. So over here, what I'm going to do is create a random y position. So int random pipe y is going to be pipe y. So this is 0, the top of the screen. And I'm going to move each pipe upwards by 1/4 of its height. So minus pipe height divided by 4. So now every pipe has shifted upwards by a quarter of its height. And then here's where I do the random. So I'm going to shift it upwards an additional amount. So it's going to be a random amount. So I do minus math.random times pipe height divided by 2. And this is going to give us a double, so I'm going to cast this to an int. So basically what we're doing is, starting from here, math.random, this gives us a value between 0 and 1, and we multiply it by pipe height divided by 2. So the height is 512 pixels, so divided by 2 gives us 256. So this part over here is going to give us a random number between 0 and 256. Okay? And pipe height divided by 4, so that's 512 divided by 4, that gives us 128. And then pipe y is 0. So in total, we're going to do 0 minus 128 minus an extra value from 0 to 256. So this is basically saying that if math.random gives us 0, then we're just going to have minus pipe height divided by 4. And if this is 1, we're going to subtract pipe height divided by 2. So the range is going to be between a quarter of the pipe height up to 3/4 of the pipe height. So this is going to be how much we're shifting upwards for the y position. And then here I'm going to do top pipe.y and change it to random pipe y. Alright, so now if I save and run my program, you can see the pipes have been shifted upwards by a random amount. Alright, cool. So now we have the top pipe with a randomized y position. Let's add the bottom pipe. And to add the bottom pipe, we need to allocate some space for the opening so that the bird can fly through. So here I'm going to create a variable called opening space. And this is just going to be board height divided by 4. Alright, so over here, let's create a pipe for the bottom pipe. So we're going to pass in the bottom pipe image. And over here, we need to set the y position because by default, the pipe y is 0. So that is the top of the screen. So we need to shift it downwards. So the y position is going to be where the top pipe starts. So top pipe.y. So this is going to be the top part of the pipe. So remember, the x and y positions start at the top left corner. So this y position is the top of the pipe. So we need to get to the bottom of the top pipe. So this is going to be the y position plus pipe height. And then from here, we need to add the opening space. And then afterwards, I'm going to add the bottom pipe to the array list. Alright, so just to explain what I did for the bottom pipe, basically, let's say this is where the top pipe starts. We need to get to this point. So we're going to take the y position and add the height. So this is how we can get the bottom part of the top pipe. And then from here, we are going to add the opening space, which is 1/4 of the board height. So here we can get the y position for the bottom pipe. Okay, so remember, xy starts at the top left corner. Alright, now let's save and run our program. And as you can see, we have 2 pipes coming in every 1.5 seconds. And we have an opening space for the Flappy Bird to fly through. Alright, so now we have the Flappy Bird and the pipes. Now we need to take care of the game over situations. So over here, I'm going to add another variable called game over. And I'm going to initialize this to false. So currently game over is false. That means we can still play the game. When is game over true? Well, we have 2 scenarios. One is when the bird just falls off the bottom screen. or when the bird collides with one of the pipes. So let's scroll down to our move function. And over here, I'm going to do if bird.y is greater than board height, we're going to set game over to true. And within our action performed, I'm going to make a check. If game over, I'm going to stop the timers. So place pipes timer dot stop. So this is going to stop adding more pipes to the array list. And then I'm going to do game loop dot stop. So this is going to stop repainting and updating the frames of our game. Alright, so now let's save and run our program. And you can see we're playing the game, and if I fall down, the game stops moving. So we have game over. And the second scenario would be if the bird collides with one of the pipes. So over here, I'm going to create a function called collision, and we're going to pass in the bird. So I'm going to call it A and pipe B. And here we're going to write a specific formula for detecting collision. It's a bit complicated, so I'm not going to explain it in this video. So just copy the code here. So return a.x less than b.x plus b.width, and a.x plus a.width is greater than b.x, and a.y is less than b.y plus b.height, and a.y plus a.height is greater than b.y. Okay, so this is the formula for detecting collision, and I don't want to go too in depth on explaining how this all works, but just trust me, it works. So up here, I'm going to add a check. So if collision, bird, and pipe, so if this returns true, then we're going to set game over to true. Alright, let's save and run our program. And you can see the bird is moving, and if I collide with the pipe, the game freezes, right? So game over, we stop painting. Alright, so now we covered the two game over scenarios. So now what we need to do is keep track of the score so that we can see how many pipes we've passed. So I'm going to scroll back up, and over here, I'm going to create a double score and set it to 0. And you might be wondering why it's a double instead of an integer, and I'm going to show you in a few seconds. And so we start off with 0, and every time we pass a set of pipes, we increment the score by 1. So let's go back to our move function. So over here, I'm going to add another condition. So if not pipe.passed, so currently it's false, so the bird has not passed this pipe, and bird.x is greater than pipe.x plus pipe.width. So we're checking over here. If the bird has not passed this pipe, and the x position of the bird is past the right side of this pipe, so remember, pipe.x starts on the left side, and then we add pipe.width to it so that this is going to give us the right side of the pipe. So if the bird passes the right side of the pipe, then we can say pipe.pass is equal to true. And then we can add the score. So score plus equal 0.5. And the reason why we do 0.5 is because there are two pipes, so we split the points by half for each pipe. So every time the bird passes two pipes, we add 0.5 and 0.5. Okay, so the player should only get 1 point for each set of pipes. Alright, so now we have our score. Let's display it. So in our draw function, I'm going to do g.setColor color.white. So over here, let's set a new font. So I'm going to do g.setFont, new font, and let's make it Arial. Font.plain, and I'm going to set the size to 32 pixels. All right, so here we're going to make a check. So if game over, so g.drawString game over, and let's also display the score. So string.value of, and I'm going to cast the score to an int. So int score. And then here I'm going to put the X and Y position. So I'm going to make it 10 pixels to the right and 35 pixels down. Else, we're going to do g.drawString, and we're just going to print out the score. So string.value of int score 1035. All right, so that's drawing the score on the screen. So let's save and run our program. And you can see we have a 0 on the top left. And if I pass a pair of pipes, we have 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if I collide with a pipe, you can see game over and we have a score of 5. And let's run the game again. So you can see 0, and if I fall down, game over, and our score is 0. Alright, so now the final thing we need to do is reset the game by pressing the spacebar key. So resetting a game is actually very easy, and all we need to do is make a check. So we need to check to see if game over. So when we press the spacebar key, we check if it's game over. And what we're going to do here is restart the game by resetting the conditions. So we need to reset all the variables to their default values. So you can see up here, we have the bird Y position, and then we have an array list of pipes and the velocity X and Y. So these are things that we need to reset if we want to create a new game. So down here, I'm going to start by setting the Y position of the bird back to the default value. So bird.y is going to be bird Y. And then I'm going to make velocity Y 0. Let's clear the pipes. So pipes.clear. Then let's set the score back to 0. Set game over to false. And then restart the game loop and the place pipes timer. Okay, so we restart the game by resetting the values. Alright, so now let's save and run our program. So you can see we have the Flappy Bird. We're going to get 1 point, and then 2 points, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, and then let's get 1 more. And then if I collide, you can see game over 7 points. And then if I press the space bar, it's going to reset the game. And you can see the score is 0 and the bird is moving again. And we collide, we get game over, 2 points. And then one more time. And you can see I crash, I fall down, I fall past the boundaries. Therefore, game over, and I wasn't able to make it past any pipes, so the score is 0. Okay, so we have a fully functional game of Flappy Bird written in Java. So if you found this tutorial helpful, make sure you give this video a like. If you have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.